Welcome back to Voices of Impact, where we explore the conversation shaping the future of leadership, identity, and human potential. Today's episode is an invitation to challenge one of the most deeply rooted patterns many women carry, waiting to be chosen, right? Waiting for the title, waiting for the invitation, waiting for someone else to recognize what they already know within themselves. But what if the next level of your leadership doesn't begin when someone gives you permission? Right? What if it begins the moment you choose yourself? Right? So, very powerful question, powerful conversation today. So, joining me today is Fay Niewiadomski, an international award winning change management strategist, a leadership coach, and founder and CEO of ICTN, for a powerful conversation on leadership, courage, and stepping into your influence with confidence and conviction. Right. So, with over 5 decades of experience across academia, business, and organizational transformation, Faye has built schools, universities, and businesses while coaching CEOs, board members, government leaders, and organizations around the world through seasons of growth and change. Her work is rooted in powerful belief that leadership is not really just waiting for a position or external validation, right? It's really about developing the competence and the compassion to step forward and create that meaningful impact you're meant to create. So through her signature 4 Journeys of a Leader framework, Faye helps leaders navigate transformation by integrating that strategy, but like neuroscience and emotional intelligence and human connection, which is very in demand these days, very important. So this conversation goes far beyond leadership skills, right? It's about the self-trust and it's about the courage to stop shrinking and start owning the influence you already carry. So Faye, welcome to Voices of Impact. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Veena. That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. Let's get into it. So, Faye, when someone looks at your career from outside, I know they see decades of leadership and transformation, but what were some of the moments or challenges or even seasons in your life that shaped the leader you became, but that people will never see like on a resume, I would say?
The things that we never put on a resume is who we are as people. And that person that you are when you're a child continues to evolve with you. What changes are the rules you play by and are the beliefs you accept. And I was constantly chosen as a leader when I was a child, but I never knew why. I never figured it out. And at the same time, you have the contradictory lesson of who you should be as a woman, who should you be as a girl. You should be well behaved. I mean, if I wanted to translate into body language, it's this.
Right.
And it's this.
Yeah.
And it's keeping yourself small. And those 3 things, remaining silent, obedient, and small, are what limits us. And those I found very difficult to live with because my parents were very conservative. And at the same time, I was living in a culture that was very different from theirs. So the contradiction and the cognitive dissonance between what I was experiencing in my everyday life and the rules and regulations that I was being fed at home as the right way to behave, what it meant to be a good girl and what it meant to be successful, were in contradiction with one another. And it took me a long time to figure out that the longer you wait, the longer you delay your success and the realization of who you are. But also, we need to remember that when we step out of line, there's a cost.
Yeah.
There is no free ride. There's anywhere. And so you need to, first of all, recognize that you have put yourself in what I call a mental prison.
Right.
When you accept beliefs, those limitations are self-imposed, self-inflicted. And you need to recognize that first, to recognize that you are not at all restricted by anybody but yourself. You know, a piece of research that was done, Veena, by Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania, the writer of Learned Optimism, is an amazing piece of work about how we become helpless. And he coined the term learned helplessness. They did an experiment with dogs. Dogs' very sensitive noses are easily hurt. And so they had the dogs in a separator where there was a transparent glass separating the cubicle where they were. In the next cubicle was a big chunk of juicy red meat. And the dog wanted that and kept trying to get in. But every time they tried to get to the meat, they hurt the very sensitive nose.
Right.
And so the dog learned, to just whimper and stay back. And when they removed the glass barrier, the divider that kept the dog away from the meat, the dog didn't move. It sat obediently.
Yeah.
Even though the barrier was no longer there. And that's what we do to ourselves throughout our lives when we accept this learned helplessness and we believe fairy tales like, there's going to be a reward for the good person.
Right.
If you behave well, you're going to get a present, something good is going to happen if you are compliant, obedient, and silent. But the most unhappy person in that equation is you.
Right. Absolutely.
So it took a while, but I can say that I became what many people described as a rebel, a rule breaker. And that has shaped who I am, not only now, but, how I evolved into becoming who I am.
Yeah.
I would question the rules. I would ask the uncomfortable questions to the point where I was told, please stop coming to class. Just come and do the final exam when I was in college. You're disrupting the indoctrination.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yes, it's a hard lesson to learn because it's not easy to step out of line. And the irony of it is that many people of your own gender, of your own culture, are the first to point a finger at you and criticize you because, you're not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you become, an outlier. You don't have a lot of friends, but you have to ask, what is more important to me?
Yeah.
Compliance or the realization of my potential as a human being?
Exactly.
And that's the choice we make.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be safe and comfortable or become yourself.
Right. Right. Wow. Wow. No, I love what you said. And everything that you said, I feel like is a mirror of me, right? Because it's the whole story for, thank you so much for sharing that. So I think that was very powerful and absolutely 1,000% right. And I totally understand what you said. I'm pretty sure a lot of women resonate because that was my story as well. Just like you, I was raised in a very conservative family. And even now, it's still going on. Don't say this, don't say that, don't wear this, don't wear that. Has a lot of control. And if I speak my truth immediately, was like this, mean person, this rude person. I would always get labeled and I always like shrunk, but I would always shrink and silence myself. And hence why I, even created Voices of Impact, because owning and reclaiming my voice was a very huge challenge. And it still is a challenge in my own family till today. And I was from a very traditional woman of color. It's hard because we were taught to just, be part of that. I mean, my family is more of like the male domination, and I was part of the corporate world too. And like I was just supposed to be submissive, right? I wasn't supposed to like speak up, even if it was my mom or my dad or anything. And I loved what you said, like with the dog and the reward. And my mom would say the same thing. Like, I got this from my mom. And she would say, like, I was the good girl. I did everything correctly and right. And I was disciplined and I had that justice and I was fair. But what did I get out of it? Right. Like, I thought there was an achievement. I thought it was a reward at the end. And I was just unhappy. And she still says this every day. And I realized, like, the next generation, I was like, I can't be like this anymore with carrying that generational trauma. And all of that, I need to break the cycle breaker. And to your point, I'm also a rebel. I always say, ask why with everything. And even now, why am I on earth? Why am I doing this work? What is my calling? Like, why do I want to make an impact? So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it was more than just like, titles and everything. It was like, what is that calling? Is there like a purpose or a mission or something? So I love everything that you said was just not only me, but I think every woman who can listen to this at any stage, right? Whether in their 20s or 30s, I see a lot of mothers asking the same question of questioning, like, why did I have to wait for something? Especially in that age of motherhood. And especially in the culture that I'm from, a lot of women tolerate things that they're not supposed to tolerate, and they wait until something happens. Like, this is how it's supposed to be, rather than like, this is what I want. Am I truly happy? Because we're not used to sacrificing, we're so used to like worrying about other people's needs, but not focusing on ourselves, right? So I'm really glad that you're a rebel, and I see that, and you're able to like share this timeless wisdom to us and become the woman. Like you said, it's a choice, right? And back then, I feel like my mom would always say that we didn't have a choice, but now we do. So I wanted to ask you that question of, sometimes people say like, I didn't have a choice. I had to go through this. But what would you say to those kind of people who would say like, I
Well,
didn't have a choice?
two things. When you say you don't have a choice, you've just made a choice. You've made
Yeah,
the choice of submission.
exactly.
And that choice of submission is soul destroying, because what you have done is to agree to erase your identity
Right.
and to fit a mold that someone else has cast for you that may or may not be suitable.
Hmm.
You're also accepting a lot of rules and societal restrictions that were set up for somebody else's convenience, not for yours.
Hmm.
So when you say, I have no choice, you have taken the path of submission.
Right. Yeah.
You always have a choice. And until you recognize you have the ability to say no, you haven't taken the other path. But now that path is the risky one.
Mm.
So when you say no, there is a risk. So I believe many women, because of the way they have been raised, what they have been told in different cultures, and there is this mysterious person who they're waiting for to reward and recognize them. I don't know who that is, and the last resort, this is kind of a aside. The last resort is there's somebody in the sky somewhere, if it's not a human, who is going to reward you.
Right.
Now, nobody can prove that. Nobody has ever demonstrated that. But if you take that path where you say, no, I will say no, I will be one of the people who say no, you need to learn the skills of navigating that path, because you want to stay safe and you want to stay
Yeah.
alive. And I'm not advocating stupidity. I'm not advocating rash actions. I'm advocating that you learn the power to influence other people. You learn observation. You learn asking questions. You learn getting people to move in the direction you need to move, and you need for them to move without coercion. Because if you don't learn to do that, you're
Hmm.
going to be in trouble.
Right.
Men are combative. They've been trained to be combative. That's part of their socialization. So if you try to play the role of a man and be
Right.
combative, you're going to be crushed,
Yeah.
because they don't like that. So
Exactly.
instead, you need to learn, if you want to be an independent person, you need to learn techniques like, you just said XYZ. Did you mean that? Is that what you meant to say?
Yeah.
Because by repeating and reflecting, mirroring what people said, you give them the chance to hear themselves, to hear their words.
Yeah.
This is just one example, but it's always dependent on the context. Observing Who are you dealing with? Sometimes silence is the better way, because
Yeah.
when you're quiet, you haven't made a confrontation, you haven't raised attention, and you go ahead and do whatever it is you want to do without calling attention to yourself. Who's watching you? It's just a power play. It's
Exactly.
just a routine that they're used to. So the judgment call is yours, but it all begins with observation. Who is that individual that you are talking to? What is the situation? What are the consequences? What are the risks? How do I navigate my path safely
Mhm.
towards that no, towards claiming my independence? So, it really takes a good deal of emotional intelligence,
Exactly.
of practical observation, and of superb communication and influencing skills, so you can do what you need to do without ruffling feathers or getting your head chopped off.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Everything you said is right on point. And a lot of women these days, I love how you talked about the different power dynamics, because that is a huge thing these days, whether it's not only in personal life, especially in corporate, if you're going in higher letters, leadership, and yeah, men have their own ways. And I've noticed with people, like some people, when a woman's aggressive or it comes out in a different way, immediately we're labeled it differently, right? So we can still reclaim our voice and power, like you said, with compassion, with empathy, and with emotional intelligence, to your point, by asking the right questions. And yes, I think nowadays, because of like remote work, and we don't really focus on the value of communication as much, right? And that's something that I always tell my own team members and anyone I work with is, why don't we communicate with one another? Why don't we find a middle ground? Like looking, like you said, right, like finding the context. And there was a situation where like someone was pointing fingers and I was like, it's okay, I had to, it was all not only taking up my power, but really reclaiming my energy, right? I was like, I don't need to react, I just need to kind of sit with it for a bit and see where she's coming from. And then, how like I was talking about, it's not like you and me, we had a partnership and it was like, hey, it's the us, right? We're here to kind of rise together and work together, how we can find a common ground. So it's the empathy. And especially as women, sometimes we tend to neglect that power that we have, the feminine power and the feminine qualities that someone said, like, we're not supposed to show emotions or show vulnerability, but asking for support, asking, like actually being able to receive and asking the right questions is very important to any kind of conflict resolution or a power play. So authentic power. And like you said, how that leads to like natural influence, right? And through your body language, right? And just your words that you use are just so powerful. And the fact that you said silence is key, right? So we tend to always be like, I need to say something. And this is a huge thing, that a lesson that I think a lot of us are learning is you can say no through not only silence, but like not over explaining. And that's true power. And that's something that I learned with feminine power. And I wanted to kind of put that there because of the patterns that we see in women these days is overgiving, over explaining, over apologies. Like, I'm sorry that I had to do this. And I tell my team and everyone, like, if you want to say no and you set that boundary, you don't need to apologize, right? You don't need to over explain, right? This is for you and that's okay. If you need to set that boundary and it's violating, you feel like it's just uncomfortable in your body and it's restricting, it's totally fine to do that, right? You don't have to shrink and play small. And you can take these small steps to really reclaim that power, right? In the right way and fully claim that authority at the same time. So I love what you said about all of that. Yeah.
There's a lot of habitual unconscious behavior that we have copied,
Yeah.
and we're not aware of that. You just said, we shouldn't be vulnerable. That those things are, again, some of the rules that have been set without examination, acceptance, without any critical assessment of this. Does this help me? Does it not help me? When should I be vulnerable and when not? When is vulnerability a power and when is it a weakness? Because there isn't a one way.
Right.
So I'll give you some examples. You're sitting in a meeting and you're saying something and you get interrupted and you're not allowed to finish. Now, if you accept that, you have just, done the behavior that you have been conditioned to do because you've seen other women do it. But you need to break the patterns and first of all, become conscious of the pattern. And second, say, excuse me, I'd like to finish what I started. Excuse me, I'd like to finish what I was saying. Or you say something and you're ignored, and then some man in the room repeats exactly what you said. And isn't that a wonderful idea? Because he said it, not you. And instead of remaining silent and getting upset, you need to look across the way and say, John, thank you for repeating the idea. I'm glad they listened to you.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to defend your boundaries, not just to say, I have boundaries in your head. You need to have practical defenses that are not offensive. As I said, you need to navigate your way safely through that path. And when it's not safe, you need to get out of the danger zone. Because there are so many different circumstances, but women have learned, because we are mimetic creatures. We are like monkeys. We copy what we see. And although we may think that we want to be independent and we want to say no and we want to protect our boundaries, we are copying behavior that says the opposite. And 93% of communication has nothing to do with our words. It has to do with our tone of voice, our actions, our physical behavior. And when we're not conscious of managing that and how we project ourselves to the world, we say something, but we confirm the opposite to people.
Yeah.
And that is where we need to become very aware. Women will say, I don't like gossip. But they engage in gossip.
Right.
They will listen to some awful things about another woman instead of saying, how do you know that that is true? What do you know about her circumstances? Are you sure that your conclusions are correct? Is a more powerful way of being in a world where you want to make a difference, because you have learned the strategies. You can't say, I want to go to war, and you don't train.
Yeah, exactly.
To be a warrior and how to use the different weapons and tools. And I'm not using it in a destructive way, but we need to defend ourselves. There are times when we need to be warriors, and there are times when we need to be lovers, and there are times when we need to be sovereigns, and there are times when we need to be magicians. And we can be all of them, but we need to know which one of those energies we need to access.
Right.
Depending on the context and the relationship and the goal we're looking to achieve.
Right.
There are times when you literally have to find an innovative solution, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck.
Right.
And there are times when you need to stand up and say, I'm here and I'm not moving.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is, whatever you're saying is so powerful. And I just love this conversation. And yeah, the tone of voice, the body language, and in different contexts is different things, right? Whether it's personal or professional, like you said, and you might not have access to all of it, but we have to find that solution and knowing how to navigate it, because I think that's very key. And I do have a question. So someone who, I know you talked about feeling safe. So someone who has been in a lot of toxic environments, right? And as a career coach, I can, I've seen a lot of women who have come into careers and environments who are saying I struggled to speak up. I always wait for something or wait for permission. And I ask them can you share more and why? And they were like, I just never felt safe. I was always in a toxic environment and there was trauma. So what would you say to someone who has been in that situation, who's still feeling unsafe in their body, but they're struggling to just kind of speak up or reclaim their voice and authority in those situations?
It's very hard to do. So let's first of all acknowledge that it's difficult to do.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to make suggestions when you don't understand the 360 perspective of the context in which the person is experiencing this. But let me give some examples to make it concrete. Let's say you have a boss, and that boss could be male or female. Both are susceptible to the narcissistic, sadistic behavior, where they believe that leadership means bossing and abusing others.
Mhm.
Now, if you are living in such an environment, your circumstances are going to dictate your appetite for confrontation. Let's say you are a single mother, you have children, you have to support your family. So those things have to be taken into consideration. We can't just give people glib advice based on some kind of formula that has nothing to do with their reality. So first is to understand the reality, the 360 perspective of what that person is experiencing. And the second thing is to take your time and contemplate what is the best defensive strategy. For example, someone who has a boss who is rude and abusive to them and speaks to them in a language that is really unacceptable to them. If they accept that, they will get more, because those people are internally cowards. And the more you submit, the greater they feel in terms of being empowered, and they feel gratified that they have someone who they can pin down.
Yeah.
Makes them feel powerful.
Yeah.
So you need to contemplate, what is it that I can do? And prepare that. Go through the scenario in your head. Live it, visualize it, imagine yourself saying it. Write it down, practice it. So that when that person is abusive to you, you can look at them and say, I'm sorry, but I don't understand that language.
Yeah.
In a very calm, non-sarcastic voice, because if you say it with sarcasm, you're going to get more trouble.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you say it in a very calm, neutral voice, like, I'm sorry, but I just don't understand this language. What exactly would you like me to do?
Wow.
It's not submissive,
Right.
but it's not provocative.
Exactly.
So, and those things don't happen spontaneously.
Yeah.
So I don't want your listeners to imagine that this is some kind of a talent that you were born with.
Exactly.
You learn it. It's a learnable skill.
Right.
But again, you need to be working with somebody who is able to understand the context that you're facing, to ask you the right questions, to get really a deep understanding of what it is and what you are able to tolerate.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
You need to understand what you can do and not try to do something that you can't do and you can't do sustainably.
Yeah.
Sometimes it requires that you quietly go and look for another job.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where you're not working in this environment. You can't change the environment, you can't change people, but you can remove yourself from it.
Right. Yeah.
And that is an option that many people who exhibit the same learned helplessness, like those dogs, remain in a toxic situation. They feel self-victimized. And guess what? The irony of it is that some of them get their significance from feeling victimized.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they go and tell everybody about what a horrible life they have and what a horrible boss they have. And when people sympathize with them, it validates that victimization. And it fulfills, unfortunately, the need for love and connection, because now they have the sympathy. They don't really have love. It's just a connection.
Yeah.
And people like gossip and people like to listen to bad stuff. So they get attention. And that's what goes for love and connection. They also get significance. because now they are the center of attention as the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And they get certainty because they know that every time they talk about their victimhood, they're going to get that sympathy and
Mm-hmm.
attention.
Yeah.
And all that happens is that then the situation remains as is,
Right.
and they don't get out of it.
Yeah.
So the first question you ask yourself, am I comfortable being a victim? What am I gaining out of being a victim? And if you are benefiting from being a victim, then you're not going to get out of it because the benefit outweighs the, the gain outweighs the pain of getting out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, and we talk about secondary gain when we work with people who've had this kind of secondary gain. Means that keeping your problem is more beneficial to you than getting rid of it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's why sometimes people get into coaching and therapy, and they don't get out of their problem because their problem is a benefit to them. It sounds crazy, but that's how it works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. No, thank you for sharing. And absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of people who, yeah, they're in their environments, like how you said, the calm authority, and those are very powerful messages that you had and powerful tips because that's a struggle these days. And a lot of women, especially, they just kind of tend to be like, you know what, I don't know how to speak up. Like no one taught them, right? No one trained them. This is what you should say. This is how you should speak in that calm authority and calm power. So they should be like, yeah, let me just silence myself. Like that's, like you said, that's what everyone else is doing. And then they become in victim mode. And I see a lot of people in victim mode saying, like, I don't have a choice, back to square. This is how life is. I'll just stay small. And then it benefits them. And then they go into that external validation and they think like that's true happiness, but in reality isn't. And the thing is, like, we have to go inward and understand, why are we like this? Where is it coming from? How can we really hold ourselves accountable, right? And not be a victim and reclaim our power in a way that doesn't, like, of course, hurt anyone, but it should not come from outside. It should come from within. So learning more of our self-worth, that I deserve to be seen, I deserve to be heard, and I deserve to have those boundaries set, right? And yes, if it's like you said, if they are not willing to change, we can't change people, but we have to have that self-respect to remove ourselves from that place, right? So
You have to have enough compassion for yourself
yeah,
to ask, who do I want to be?
exactly.
And if that is the identity I'm happy with, let me not blame anybody.
Right.
So when we develop or build our self-confidence, two things happen. One, we discover who we really want to be. And second, we're proud of that.
Right.
Because that is where the self-esteem comes.
Exactly.
So you need both. You need to have an identity and you need to be proud of it. You need to know it. You need to be proud of it. And when those two things don't come together, you don't have a sufficient level of self-confidence to motivate yourself. So, I like to use a metaphor of a car. You have this beautiful red Ferrari, right?
Yeah.
Fabulous car. But it's in the garage. And that represents your self-ideal. That's who you would like to be. And you may even dress up yourself and decorate yourself to look like that red Ferrari. That's your self-ideal.
Yeah.
The second piece is the engine in the car. You have the engine is what gives it, you have the gears and the transmission and all of that gives the car the drive. And that is what I call your self-image. The engine represents who you really think you are, what's inside. Now, your reaction to what's inside. Are you repulsed by who you think you are, or are you proud of who you think you are? How do you feel about who you are? Do you believe you deserve better? You deserve, and that's a big deal
Right.
because that's what self-esteem is.
Yeah.
Now, you can have a beautiful car and you can have a powerful engine, but that feeling that you deserve better
Right.
and that you are proud of who you are and what you have achieved is the fuel of motivation. That's what puts the gas in the tank.
Yeah.
And without that, that car remains in the garage. It will never drive out.
Exactly.
And understanding that is the foundation of having people move from where they are. Discovering yourself, discovering that there is a lot to be proud of, that
Yeah.
your achievements are there, that you are grateful for what you have. The minute you compare, and this is the kiss of death, comparing yourself to other people.
Right.
Compared to well, but somebody's better, richer, fatter, shorter, taller. The minute you start comparing, you have just written your death sentence.
Right.
The death sentence of your self-esteem, because this is how you tear yourself down. There are people who haven't, it maybe by comparison to someone who has a Ph.D. from Harvard, may believe that they don't have a lot to be proud of. But what if they had parents who were very poor, who were illiterate, who came from a village where they didn't even have running water?
Right.
And you are the first person to go to college and graduate, the first educated person in your family. What if you worked to pay for that education because your parents couldn't pay for it? Wow. You have more to be proud of than someone who came from a wealthy family, got accepted into Harvard and did a PhD fully supported.
Right.
So comparisons are very, very bad ideas.
Yeah.
And until you get to that stage where you say, I recognize my achievements.
Mhm.
I am proud of those achievements. And I'm very grateful that I have moved, several degrees up the social scale
Yeah.
from where my parents were, for example. And people don't do that. They assume that they need to be, at the top of the pyramid from birth. And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Beating yourself up, say, oh, I'm unlucky, I'm unfortunate. That's another way of embracing victimhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you did the analogy of the car, and who you are becoming. And I know we went into that environment of the toxic. Yeah, every decision that you make needs to align to who you're meant to be and who you're becoming, right? And to your point, it's every decision. I can relate to my own story in this becoming stages of the past 10 years. And speaking of, shrinking and playing small, I always I believe in the divine in the universe, and he kept giving me tests, right? And he kept giving me environments that where I was just playing small, and I would tolerate it, I would accept it because I didn't, and to your point, because I didn't believe I deserved it. And it was really from a place of self-worth and self-esteem. Every single person around me knew I deserved the best, but I couldn't see it for myself. And I wonder why I didn't see that, and everyone else saw it. And it was because of all of the trauma and the conditioning, right? That everyone just instilled in me, like women should be silenced and should not speak their truth. And there was one environment that I got a role and I spoke my truth in a very calm way. And, the next day I got fired, right? And I was like, for me, usually I would be like, okay, why did this happen? But I was like, you know what? I stayed in my power. And if it's not aligned, it won't happen, right? And I knew like I was in the right place and it was me becoming my most authentic self and the woman I became. And at that time, when you said, yes, I did not have actual job in front of me, but at the same time, I was proud of the woman I was because I spoke my truth. And from years of so much silencing and conditioning and all of that, someone who just couldn't even speak. I was the most very quiet person to someone who was a rebel. At that time, I was like, I'm proud of the person I am today and how far I've come. And that is my true recognition and true achievement. It might not have a title. I might not be a PhD at Harvard or anything, and I think where it comes from conservative traditional families, it's always about, did you work at Google? Did you work at Microsoft? Did you work at this? What's your, all of that stuff. And did you get married? But we never look at that process of the becoming and the identity. And most people won't understand when you go through the identity shifts, you'll realize that you enjoy the process of becoming, and that's the real success and that's the real power. And it lies in that. So, yeah, absolutely. I love everything that you said. It's really, really important for a lot of women to understand that yes, we're capable of everything, but don't let the external noise and the validation, overpower you. So yeah.
But again, we need to ask ourselves real questions about what is it that is important to us.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to go one level deeper, understanding what's your self-ideal. When I use the analogy of the Ferrari, I'm not suggesting that people should have a Ferrari, but we do a lot of outer decoration
Right.
and imitation. And that's what I meant by that analogy. The
Yeah.
engine is the real driving force from within. But without the fuel, it won't move. Now, to get the fuel, you need to look at what your values are,
Right.
because values are the deepest level of what's important to you. So let me again give another example of, if your top value is to have certainty, is to have a world around you that you can control and is predictable and safe, you will never get any fuel for that car,
Right.
because you will say, I had no choice. You will be among those who say, I have no choice. So you also need to investigate your values and how you satisfy those values. And we satisfy those values by having rules and by having beliefs.
Right.
And those can become, even though we may intellectually understand that we are being abused or we are in a situation where we are being very vulnerable, your values may be that you want certainty and you don't want to be publicly shamed by, let's say, getting a divorce or something like this. So that, and your rule is that good women, and sometimes it's quite unconscious,
Yeah.
good women don't get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
stay in the relationship for the benefit of their children,
Right.
and they justify that way. And it may be right for some people. I'm not suggesting that they should, but I'm just explaining how our values will limit the scope of choices that we put in front of ourselves.
Mm.
So if you believe that, you made a choice and you need to pay the price of that choice, you made a bad choice, and therefore you need to pay the price. That kind of, in many religions, they have this punishment for your choice,
Right.
and people stay in that relationship. So you need to examine what your rules are, what your unconscious, unwritten rules are,
Right.
and what your beliefs are. And that's what I have in my book. My book is about how to break that mental prison that has been created for us with so many different things to assist. From the stories we're told when we're sitting down around, a group of grandparents and parents, and we have all these folk tales and stories. Examine them and look at what's really in those stories.
Right.
Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys in those stories?
Yeah.
And that is being told to us when we are in an environment where we feel safe with family, or just before we fall asleep when we are so vulnerable and so suggestible. And then those things sink in.
Yeah.
And the greatest fear we all have is the fear of being rejected and unloved, because that means death.
Yeah.
That's a survival instinct, because you need to be, and that's why babies look so adorable.
Right.
And even the frequency of their cry is,
Right.
you can hear it above all the other noise.
Yeah.
So if that's our conditioning, and we have accepted those rules as truths and as the right way to behave, those values will keep us in prison.
Yeah.
So, dissecting your way of thinking, where that thought came from, is there any real justification for that? What are you gaining from accepting it? What are you losing from accepting it? And who is benefiting from your acceptance?
Exactly.
You look at all that, and you cannot look at it by yourself, simply because you're the fish in the water and you don't know what water is, just like we don't pay attention to the air we breathe. Without it, we die, but we don't notice it.
Yeah.
It's part of the landscape.
Right. Right.
And so it's super important for us to have someone who will challenge us and ask us difficult questions.
Yeah.
And that's what a good coach does, challenges and asks the difficult questions. And my book is written not for women or men. It's written for human beings who have reached a point in their life where they're asking, what do I want to do with the next part of my life?
Yeah.
Am I willing to continue along the same old path? Or do I want to reimagine how life could be for me? Do
Right.
I want to understand what's holding me back and break out of that? Because I have the key,
Exactly. Yeah.
and I can change those beliefs. And once I do that, I unlock the door.
Right.
And that's an analogy I absolutely use in my book when I talk about how to set yourself free.
Yeah. Yeah. And the key is within, right? Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And I love what you just said, because I just did that with my family, and with all the noise going around us, I actually went as a Hindu. I went back into those like folklores, and I was just asking my parents this, like, this is what the Bhagavad Gita said, and I read it, and then I was like, this is the real definition of wealth and success, and I was just really surprised myself, right? Because I was so conditioned of what everyone else told me. So when you said that, I could just really resonate.
Mhm.
Yes. And then and the values. For me, everything that I make decisions, whether it's a relationship, career, it's taken me this far is because, of course, through my own identity shifts and becoming, and of course, values. And I also want to say that the values change over in different stages, right? So especially like in my 20s, I valued like achievements and titles and fame and all of that. And because it came from proving, right? Someone, judged me for something like, you're not capable, you can't do all of that. So I kept proving. And it came from that place of like, later on, I was like, why do I need to prove something? This is for me, right? It went back to the external validation. And then in my 30s, now it's a completely different values, right? So I also want to say that your values are going to change in different stages. So, especially for motherhood, the value is family. And to your point, sometimes it's hard to get out of that mental prison. So we have to get back into ourselves and ask the questions within. And sometimes, like, there are times when my mentor saw some of my gifts that I didn't see in myself, saw my potential. And sometimes we think like, we reached our full potential, but in reality, we haven't, right? We can't see that, like you said. So you really want to make sure we have a really good mentor and a coach that sees like what's that next level of the highest self that you can be, or the most authentic self, or the highest potential, right? So you might have, there's no, and one mentor told me, like, there's no like limit or threshold. You can just keep going, but you have to get out of that box and see through it, right? So
Well,
everything they said.
the you never know your potential, and no one can bring your potential out. But I tell you what does. When you find yourself in circumstances where you never imagined that you could be in such a circumstance, and you find yourself succeeding and working your way out, it's when you live life-threatening experiences, when, as I have experienced, going to my office and having it completely bombed out, 17 years of work wiped out.
Wow.
See, our values, my own position is that our values are quite stable, but the way in which we satisfy them changes.
Yeah.
If you are always an achiever with high ambition, you're always going to be an achiever with high ambition. What
Right.
changes is how you fulfill the need for achievement. What satisfies that ambition? Now you are looking at, how can I help others? How can I support people? How can I share my experience? But that's still looking at achievement.
True.
It's not, you haven't diminished, but you have changed. You have taken away the control mechanism that you gave to other people,
Right.
to decide whether what you are doing is good enough to qualify as an achievement. You've taken away the remote control from their hands and decided that it's in your hands, and you will determine what is good enough and what is an achievement. So our values are fairly deeply embedded in our subconscious, because there's so much part of who we are, where we grew up, what our environment was. But what pushes us to fulfill that potential is when we face adversity.
True.
People who haven't faced adversity would die in extreme situations.
Yeah.
But when you face adversity and you learn how to deal with difficulty, no water, no electricity, bombs falling, they have identified something called trauma intelligence, where people learn to be vigilant, to be attentive, to pay attention to patterns, to connect the dots. You don't do that when you're living in a very safe, predictable world where the daily routine is there and you're quite safe.
True.
So everything has an upside and a downside. And having faced such a situation myself, where everything was lost, bombed, burnt, 17 years of work turned to ashes, not recoverable because it wasn't on a computer disk, was still paper.
True.
So where do you go from there? And the question I had to ask myself, when everything is taken, the title and the office and the status and all of that is gone, who are you?
Right.
Who do you become in situations where you need to take control? And that is when you reach down into the deepest resources you have as a human being. And I have 4 children. I need to support them. I had sick parents. My husband was not. He was alcoholic, and I had to deal with that. So you find resources that you never imagined you would have.
Right.
And the thing I told myself was, failure is not an option. I absolutely cannot afford to fail. And whatever I have in terms of capacity, in terms of what I know, in terms of my learning, in terms of my willingness to do what's hard and not to flinch, that is how I would get through it. And I did. But until you face situations like that, you really don't know what your potential is.
True.
Some people give up, some people fight.
Yeah. It's a persistence. Yeah.
Yes, but the most important thing is not to hand that remote control called, the your life sources to somebody else.
Right.
Never give that to somebody else to control.
Right.
You
Yeah.
don't need permission to be who you were meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very, very important message that people need to hear these days. And thank you so much for sharing your story and how inspiring it is. And yeah, and I like what you definitely said, about the values, right? It's the same value, but to your point, like it was more about giving it to others instead of bringing it to us again, and the whole remote control. And I love the examples you're sharing and all the analogies because it's easier to understand for someone, right? And I do agree, like the reason why I became the person I'm meant today, and so did you, is because of the lived experiences, right? And sometimes we have these, we turn that pain into power and we have those struggles, but it tests us. Can we really be resilient and persistent at the time? And to your point, that's when we see who we truly are and who what we're capable of and our true potential. So yeah, like thank you so much for sharing this. I really had an amazing conversation with you, and
Thank
we'll
you.
have to go into a quick rapid fire round. Okay, so let's see. If you could have dinner with any leader, past or present, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Confucius.
Oh. Mm. Wow, that's
And I would ask him, what did he conclude about life after living for so many decades? What was the conclusion? What is life really about?
mm, I love that. Very honestly, it's my mom just asked this question too. She was asking like God, like, out of all of this, what was the point? And she was asking a similar question. So when you said that, it just resonated, like, I just heard my mom say that. So yeah, absolutely. Right. We still have questions which are unanswered and we're still curious about a lot of things. And so am I. So I love that. That's a lovely question. Okay, so let's see. If you weren't doing the work you do today, what career would you secretly love to try?
I always wanted to be a neurologist,
Hmm.
a neurosurgeon,
Yeah.
a surgeon. And that's what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this. And right now I say, what I do is non-invasive neurosurgery. That's how I describe my work. That's how I describe what I do as a coach.
Right. Yeah.
But I would actually become a surgeon.
Yeah. Love that. A lot of things that you say just resonate because I was in pre-med and I studied neuroscience. And I was like straight on stubborn about being a neuroscience, or at least going into being like an eye doctor or, in that neuroscience field.
Mhm.
And now I'm here today being a coach, right? So yeah, absolutely. And it's neuroscience is super fascinating. And honestly speaking, I did not know how this relates to like energetics and leadership and how we're talking about this and science, like in the behavior, right? We combine the psychology of into leadership. So it's really nice to see how we can use it in practice now instead of
Mhm.
just like reading about it, right? So thank you for sharing that. And let's see. What's a question you wish more people asked you?
What's a question I wish more people asked me? That's a difficult one. What do you care about most? What do
Yeah,
I care about most? So they wouldn't assume,
yeah, yeah.
you know. When I was a dean at university, I was teaching one or two courses, and my students came by to hand in a thesis. And I was in the kitchen, so I walked out with an apron and said, "Ah, Mrs. Fay, you cook?"
Right.
It was shocking to them because they knew me as a professor at the university, and seeing me walking out of a kitchen was like totally shocking to them. And people don't ask, they make assumptions about what you do and what's important to you. So yes, what is most important to you would be a good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think a lot of people see one side, they don't see the other. But, as a professor, it's there's a creative side to you, right? And that feminine side. So yeah, absolutely. And asking the right questions and assuming is really important, right? And a lot of us tend to do that. But
Mhm.
I love that you said that. So I appreciate you for saying that. So, Faye, thank you for was really inspiring, honestly. So, one of my biggest takeaways is that leadership doesn't begin when someone gives you a title, an opportunity, or permission to step forward. It's a moment when you choose yourself, right? And there are times when I played small and I chose myself finally, and I can't imagine how happy I am, how thriving and joyful I am. I'm proud of who I'm becoming, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys can resonate, whoever's listening. Your work reminds us that true influence isn't built through proving or perfection, but it's really about courage, self trust, and EQ, right? Emotional intelligence, and the willingness to lead with that strength and humility, right? So, and the way you lead yourself becomes the foundation for how you lead others and the impact you create in the world, right? So, very good message today. So, if today's conversation resonated with you all, I encourage you to connect with Faye and read her book and explore her incredible work, right? Whether you're stepping into a new leadership chapter, navigating change, or deepening your influence, her wisdom offers just a powerful pathway forward. So, and these are the conversations, if you're craving them and you want to listen more, but really embodying it, I'd love to invite you into Sovereign Rise, right? It's really a global leadership ecosystem where a lot of us authors, creators, speakers, and visionaries, we navigate these identity shifts and the becoming and who we are truly becoming, right? So conversations we have and we give you the support and resources. So we blend soul and strategy with the real business outcomes. So you build a sustainable business and a career and you're in so joy and thriving. So you're your most authentic self. So we have monthly masterclasses, healing circles, and just really deeply connecting to themselves. So it's a sense of belonging and sisterhood. So we recently hosted our first mastermind, and it was just extremely powerful having these type of in-depth conversations. So if you're interested in becoming, whether it's a founding member or a speaker or partner, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to explore what's possible together. And thank you again, Faye, for everything that you do and your energy and your presence. It's very beautiful. And just until next time, I want everyone to remember that you don't need permission to become the leader you already are, right? The moment you choose yourself is the moment your leadership begins and your next chapter begins, right? So thank you for joining us on Voices of Impact. I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you very much, Veena.